Good afternoon, everybody. Learned senior advocates, my dear young friends, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are delighted to have Mr. P.B. Balaji for the second term in our webinar series. The topic being the very latest Tamil Nadu Regulation of Rights and Responsibilities of Landlords and Tenants Act, replacing the old Tamil Nadu Buildings Lease and Rent Control Act. As you know very well, last week a notification came. Thus, all the chapters are notified and all the authorities are filled up. Nothing remains to be filled up and notified. So now the lecture of P.B. Balaji sir would make a comprehensive one because the act has come into total reality now. As you all know, we have got two kinds of tenancy, and one is contractual, another is statutory. Contractual tenancy is governed by Transfer Property Act, whereas statutory tenancy is governed by the Rent Control Act. And the new Rent Control Act has got two schedules, and it has got three tiers of authorities: Rent Authority, Rent Court, and Rent Tribunal. And I am told, Mr. Balaji, that the cases are starting coming to rent courts now. So probably in a matter of 6 months or 1 year, I think in all the municipal places, including, I think town panchayats are also brought under the fold of the new act. So it will become a movement, and advocates will be, as usual, be seeing rent control petitions. So Mr. P.B. Balaji is an unquestionable authority in this subject, not only subject, very many subjects. And as he's a specialist in rent control legislation, I would rather very proudly say he's my very good friend. And he completed his 5 years degree course in law in Madras Law College in the year 1996. And he started practicing in Madras High Court in 1996, and he has put up roughly 25 years and more. And he has been practicing in civil side, especially in property, contract, rent and succession laws, besides conveyancing. And he is an associate editor of a CTC group of journals. And he is also a visiting lecturer in the Tamil Nadu State Judicial Academy. And he has also co-authored the famous co-edited book called Tamil Nadu Buildings Lease and Rent Control Act 1960. And the book has become a history in the annals of Tamil Nadu law books. And he has been a regular contributor of articles relating to law in Times of India and the Hindu. Apart from this, Mr. Balaji is known for his passion or hobby, which is something unique. He's an accredited freelance photographer who has got an accreditation with the International Cricket Committee, and he covered the 2015 Cricket World Cup that was played in Australia and New Zealand. So the introduction is very brief, and with this small introduction, may I request Mr. Balaji to handle the session. Mr. Balaji sir, you are welcome. The forum is yours.
Very good evening to one and all. Thank you, Mr. Srinivas Raghavan. Very kind words. May not deserve so much. And in fact, my privilege to be here for the second time. That itself, I deem it a great honor, because you have covered about 63 webinars so far. I think it's a record. I think really deserves a lot of appreciation. And in fact, when we discussed last time, you were very particular that I should not speak about this act for two reasons: that I'm capable of speaking other subjects also, and
Yes.
the act had not been complete. So
Yeah.
you wanted to wait. I think the time is now right, now that the rent tribunals are also constituted. And I think act, as you rightly said, things are moving forward, will move forward. The act has come to stay. So with this, I will commence the evening lecture. As Mr. Srinivas Raghavan said, on 27th of July, the rent tribunals were constituted. The rent authorities and rent courts, rent authorities were appointed, rent courts were constituted, even in May 2019. But only the rent tribunals were not constituted, and very recently they've been constituted. So all the authorities and courts and tribunals are in place. In fact, the courts have already started functioning, which I will take you briefly what happened in the early stages. But before that, I would like to give you a brief bird's eye view of the earlier rent legislation. You would have seen the structure which I shared through Mr. Srinivas Raghavan. So first is, we had the 1960 Act, Act 18 of 1960, held field closed for 60 years. So Fortunately or unfortunately, it was only a wartime enactment. During the Second World War, the landlords started fleecing tenants, started demanding very exorbitant rents, oppressing tenants, and the legislature, the government wanted to control such unreasonable eviction and racket rents which were being demanded by landlords, and tenants had no option to pay. So in that background, the rent control legislation of 1960 was enacted. In fact, if you see, throughout India, very many states came up with very similar enactments. The Delhi Rent Control Act, the Pondicherry Buildings Lease and Rent Control Act, the Kerala Buildings Lease and Rent Control Act. The one salient feature of all these acts, if you notice, is rent control, because the state wanted to control rents at that point of time. That was the prevailing situation. But with the passage of time, things have changed. Commercial establishments have come to fore. Non-residential buildings are very plenty in the city, even expanding to towns, and in villages we find multi-story buildings these days. So probably the central government felt the act was a little outdated. In fact, if you notice, number of judgments of the Honorable High Court of Madras as well as the Honorable Supreme Court, they hinted that the act had probably overdue for a change. Various judgments, they had to interpret the judgment in favor of the landlord, because basically the act was in favor of the tenants. It was concerned with protecting the tenants. Statutory protection to the tenants was made available under the rent legislations. So it was called a Rent Control Act, because the state, through the act, exercised control over the rent being collected and also the manner of eviction which governed the tenancies. So these were the problems which arose with passage of time. And by 2015, the central government suggested a Model Tenancy Act to all the states and advised them to enact their own state laws in line with the Model Tenancy Act. So the Tamil Nadu government was a pioneer and was the first state to adopt the Model Tenancy Act, and probably little tweaking here and there, they adopted the Model Tenancy Act of 2015 and came up with the present Tamil Nadu Regulation of Rights and Responsibilities of Landlords and Tenants Act 2017. Though it was enacted, it was not given effect to. The assent of the governor was not obtained for whatever reason. So in the meantime, what happened? The central government came up with another Model Tenancy Act of 2017. This act came into effect 42 of 2017 is the state enactment. It had not been given effect to. Meanwhile, some changes were suggested by a Model Tenancy Act of 2017. Therefore, amended the parent act by TN Act 39 of 2018 to bring it in line with the Model Tenancy Act of 2017. Even thereafter, for quite a while, surprisingly, the act was not given effect to. Only on 22nd of February 2019, invoking Section 1, the powers under Section 1 of the new act, the act came into force. And by such act coming into force, the Act 18 of 1960, the earlier rent control legislation, was repealed. A one-time window was given for pending proceedings for landlords to withdraw their pending eviction petitions or appeals and come before the new act. That period is now over, it has not been extended. Therefore, I'm not going to dwell much on that. So this is how the act came into force. On the same day, 22nd of February 2019, the rules also were enacted. The rules, Tamil Nadu Regulation of Rights and Responsibilities of Landlords and Tenants Rules 2019. We have now become accustomed to the old rent control law. Even when Mr. Srinivas Raghavan was speaking, he referred to as only rent control petitions. There is no more control. That is the very essence of the new act. Now the state has freed the parties, allowed them the liberty to negotiate terms as they like any other commercial agreement. An agreement between the landlord and tenant will be respected under the new act. That is the spirit of the new act. Basically, the objects of the new act, if you see, are only regulate, not control. Regulate the letting, regulation of only rights and responsibilities, not even letting, sorry. Regulate the rights and responsibilities of landlords and tenants. The applications are called only rent applications, no more RCOP. In fact, for about 60 years, it takes some time for us to forget the terms bona fide and willful. We have been very used to these two words, bona fide and willful. So under the old act, because they wanted to give some protection to the tenants, it was not sufficient if a landlord made out a case for default. He had to prove that default was willful. It was a result of supine indifference on the part of the tenant to evade payment of rent or stop payment of rent. Case of requirement for own use or occupation or demolition and reconstruction, not only the requirement must be proved, the landlord additionally had to prove bona fides. So the bona fide intention was over and above the requirement. So now these two words, willful and bona fide, are taken away. The respect is given to the predominance is given to the contract clinched between the parties. The tenant and the landlord are free to negotiate whatever terms they agree upon, as long as it is within the four corners of the new enactment, it will be respected. This is the scheme of the new act. Now, with the old act going, this act has come to stay, and we are faced with new legislation. Rent petitions are being filed before the rent courts, and I'll come a little later with regard to the structure. What are the salient features of the new act? Briefly, I will narrate what are the salient features. As Mr. Srinivasan rightly said, there are two kinds of tenancies: statutory tenancy and contractual tenancies. Now, the concept of statutory tenancy has been totally taken away under the new enactment. The Tamil Nadu government, by bringing in the new act, has totally given a go-by to the statutory tenancies. Tenants can no longer claim protection saying that I am a statutory tenant. They are bound by the new act, which gives importance to the contract between the parties. So that is the first salient feature of the new act. Number two, the concept of fair rent. We've all known how fair rent has been a very important tool at the hands of the landlords of late. If they didn't have a ground for eviction, they might even come up with a fair rent petition, take advantage of the high market values, fix a very high fair rent, which would be payable from the date of filing of the RCOP. And if that is not paid, that will give a ground for eviction for the landlord. But now the concept of fair rent is taken away because these statutory tenancies are also not available. It was only a extra protection given to the tenant so that the landlords cannot fleece the tenants by claiming exorbitant rent. Even the tenant could approach under the old act and seek for fixation of fair rent. Therefore, this concept of fair rent is not available under the new act. The growing concept of property managers is very important. Absentee landlords, we know number of people, NRIs, invest in properties in India. They are unable to personally look after their properties. So there are companies which have now come up doing this service. They can be engaged as the property managers of XYZ. They will be dealing with the tenants. They will let out the property of the landlord who lives abroad, the absentee landlord. He is a glorified agent. He is definitely an agent of the landlord. There is no difference. But the concept of property manager for the landlord is now recognized. His role is set out under the new act. He can represent the landlord in all the dealings with the tenant insofar as the tenancy is concerned. This is insofar as the property manager. Then very important is registration of the agreement. The new act now mandates two things. One, the agreement must be in writing. Under the TP Act, even an oral tenancy is acceptable, legally permissible. But under the new act, any agreement of tenancy must be in writing and it should be registered. It should be registered with the rent authority. That is the first tier of the three-tier structure which Mr. Srinivasan mentioned, the rent authority. What is his role? I will come a little later. So the agreement has to mandatorily be in writing and duly registered with the rent authority. This registration has got nothing to do with the registration under the Registration Act or the Transfer of Property Act. If otherwise this tenancy agreement is required to be registered with the sub-registrar concerned, then it has to be registered. It does not matter whether it is registered under the rent authority or not. If you want to come under the act, you will have to register with the rent authority. If otherwise the agreement, suppose it is say for a period of 3 years and with an extension of further 3 years, that agreement is compulsory registrable under section 17 of the Registration Act. Therefore, you will have to register with the concerned sub-registrar. That is a regular registration. This registration with the rent authority is only under the act. It does not substitute the registration which you have to do otherwise with the concerned sub-registrar if required. So this is another salient feature. And we have the process of eviction is made quite simple. Earlier, we have seen cases go up to the Supreme Court, fought tooth and nail, definitely up to the High Court. Tenant will be having the wherewithal to fight at least up to the High Court. And some affluent tenants may even go to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, in fact, in Atmaram's case, came down very heavily on courts granting time liberally to tenants and allowing tenants to drag proceedings by imposing fine on the lakh of rupees on the tenant who managed to drag the proceedings for about 40 years. So the Atmaram's case was a sound for the lower court judges by the Supreme Court that don't allow tenants to take advantage of the loopholes in the law. So these all were pointers which have now taken care of in the new act. Now under the new act, there are timelines. The rent authority, in case of essential services being disrupted, you can invoke section 20 under the new act and ask the rent authority to restore the amenity which has been disrupted by the landlord. That application has to be decided within 30 days. All other applications before the rent authority have to be decided within a period of 90 days. Similarly, eviction petitions, which will all go only to the rent court. There seems to be a lot of confusion even today. Even this morning, somebody was talking to me, he said, how an application will lie for eviction? Should I not go before the rent authority, deputy collector? I said no, because the act is very clear. Even original act before the amendment 42 of 2017 also was very clear. There was some misleading information in the media and press, the social media, saying that hereafter evictions will be before the deputy Tahsildar, the government bodies. That has probably instilled some confusion in the minds of even advocates. So you can be very clear, any eviction petition is only before the rent court, not before the rent authority. Interestingly, now the rent court is also an appellate court. Any orders passed by the rent authority are appealable under section 33 of the act to the rent court within a period of 30 days. So now not only is an original court trying eviction petitions, but the rent court is also an appellate court trying appeals, deciding appeals from the rent authority concerned who passes an order within his jurisdiction. So therefore, it is a twin role which is played by the rent court. Applications for eviction before the rent court are to be disposed of within a period of 90 days. So here again, the act has ensured that there is no unnecessary dragging by either of the parties. There should be quick disposal for these matters. Summary disposal should be given, period of 90 days. Final orders passed are appealable to the rent tribunal, which have been constituted last week, in fact, on 27th of July, 2020. Rent tribunals, insofar as the city of Chennai are concerned, it is the principal district judge, city civil court, and excepting the first additional and fifth additional judges, and 8 to 14 district judges, all the other judges are rent tribunals. The senior most of them, being the principal judge, city civil court, will be the principal appellate member. Insofar as other districts, all the principal district judges and the additional district judges will be the rent tribunals. Insofar as all the other 32, 33 districts in Tamil Nadu, the respective principal district judges will be the appellate members. So if there is, for example, in Madurai, there is a rent court which has decided an eviction petition, the tenant will have to take it up before the principal district judge, Madurai. He has the power to allocate business if there are, let's say, additional courts. There are 3 additional courts or 2 additional courts. The principal district judge will allocate the business, being the senior most member. He can say this matter, this appeal, X appeal will go to additional judge 1. Y appeal will go to additional judge 2. This is so far now very clear. So rent court orders, only final orders. Unlike any order, it is not any order which is appealable. Only the final orders are appealable to the rent tribunal. And finality is sought to be given for orders of the rent court and the rent tribunal. So the act very expressly states that any order of the rent court subject to appeal before the rent tribunal shall be final and cannot be called in question in any eviction execution proceedings or in a suit. Similarly, even the judgment or order of the rent tribunal is made final. So no appeal or revision is provided expressly provided under the Act. Therefore, they want to give a quietus to litigation within a span of, say, 6 months to 7 months, which is a very laudable object. And we will have to see how the courts are going to go about this disposal within the stipulated times. And another interesting new feature is partial eviction. All of you have definitely been practicing. You would have at least appeared in half a dozen rent control cases before the rent control courts. Under the old Act, partial eviction was not permissible. Tenancy could not be split up. That was the principle which was laid down. A tenancy can never be split up. If I let out a ground floor and first floor, I cannot go and ask for eviction of only the ground floor. I will have to seek eviction of the entire premises let out because tenancy cannot be split up. But under this Act, there is a provision with the consent of the landlord, partial eviction can be ordered. It requires the consent of the landlord. Yet another salient feature which you could not have dreamt of under the old legislation is landlord can enter the property and build additional structures. He can seek the permission of the rent court. Here again, it is not rent authority, it is only the rent court. Under section 26, he can approach the rent court and say, this building has only 2 floors. Today, the master plan has been revised. I am entitled to put up 2 more floors. I am having the wherewithal. I plan to put up additional floors of number 3 and 4 and use it for my own occupation or give it to my son and daughter. That is now permissible. Under the earlier law, once the property was given to the tenant, landlord had no right to enter upon the property for carrying out any additional construction or except maybe for repairs as warranted under the old Act. And another section 27 is also a new feature where there is vacant space available. For example, it is a 6-ground property. The building actually is housed only in 1.5 grounds. The remaining 4.5 grounds is vacant. The landlord wants to build a new construction in the vacant site, say 3 grounds. He can again approach the rent court under section 27 and say, there is a possibility for me to exploit vacant land. Please permit me, the tenant is not permitting me to enter the property in order to put up new construction in the 3 grounds. Rent court can permit the landlord to do such new construction in the vacant site. This is section 27. Most important, as you all know, is section 39 is execution. All of you may be aware how execution is battle by itself. It starts a new chapter. In fact, I am fondly remembered of a quote which an author of the Law of Execution book, I think Calcutta writer, he dedicated to his book Law of Execution to decree holders who are alive. That is the sad state of affairs. You may get a paper decree, you may get a very good decree, fight up to Supreme Court, but still round 2, like Bahubali 2, it will start. Never ending. Execution will go on, it will be never ending. But here, execution proceedings must be summarily disposed of within 30 days. Code of Civil Procedure is not made applicable. It is very, very important. So only under CPC, we have seen section 47, section order 21, rule 58, 2197, 2196 petitions, stalling execution. Here CPC is not made applicable to execution proceedings. The rent court must decide the matter within 30 days. And again, finality is given. There is no appeal or revision. Now, this is again a very laudable object. So it appears to be an act which is loaded in favor of the landlords. To some extent, I should say yes. But again, tenants are not left without any remedy, which I will briefly bring you to the various provisions. So coming to now eviction. There are, as I said, eviction actions can be only before the rent court, and an application has been filed in the prescribed format. What are the grounds for eviction? Very interesting ground, 21(2)(a), where the parties fail to enter into a tenancy agreement. So section 4 mandates an agreement to be registered. It contemplates cases where on the date of the commencement of this new act, there was no agreement. Section 4(2). it initially gave a time of 90 days for the parties to enter into an agreement in writing and thereafter register it with the rent authority. That is number one. Section 4.3 is a case where agreements were in place in writing but not registered with the rent authority. So 4.3 mandated agreements which were subsisting on the date of commencement of the Act go and register with the rent authority. These are two cases. Section 5.3 is a case where tenancy lapses. What will happen? Once the tenancy lapses and the landlord has not chosen to call upon the tenant to vacate, and there has been no fresh agreement between the parties duly registered with the rent authority, then the tenancy will continue for a period of 6 months, maximum period of 6 months on a month-to-month basis on the same terms on which the agreement lapsed. The final last agreement which was in place would govern the parties for a maximum period of only 6 months. Unfortunately, what happens thereafter, nothing is said. 21(2)(a), if you see, the ground for eviction is available to the landlord and the tenant. Even a tenant can terminate the tenancy and invoke section 21(2)(a) and surrender possession. It is not only available to the landlord. 4.2 permits both the landlord and tenant to terminate tenancy if the agreement is not clinched and it is not registered with the rent authority. So failure to enter into an agreement is a ground for eviction, provided the agreement was not subsisting before the commencement of the Act. So let us take an example where an agreement in writing was subsisting. It lapsed a couple of months after the Act came into force. The 21(2)(a) does not come to the rescue of the landlord. Only section 4.2 is ground for eviction. Failure to enter into tenancy under section 4.2 alone is made available as a ground for eviction. Then default. 21(2)(b) is default. As I said, there is no more willful default, only default. But here, sufficient protection is sought to be given to a tenant. A notice has to be given. If there is continuous default of 2 months, a notice will have to be given by the landlord as and served in terms in line with section 106 of the TP Act. Here again, there is a room for confusion. It is only service as contemplated under 106. You need not give 15 days notice as contemplated under 106. 106(4) contemplates service of notice, the manner which you have to serve notice on the tenant. That alone you will have to comply. For giving a 2 months notice, a 1 month notice will have to be given. If in spite of 30 days after issuance of the notice, the default continues, the tenant does not come up and pay the rents, come forward to pay the rents, the landlord can make an application for eviction before the rent court. Here again, tenant is given one more opportunity to get the eviction petition dismissed. If he pays the rents within 30 days from the date of filing of the eviction petition, or within 30 days from the date of service of notice on him, then the rent court will dismiss the eviction petition. Ground of default will not survive. So number one, tenant, as we all know, time and again the High Court and Supreme Court have knocked the heads of tenants, saying that you don't need a reminder. It is your duty to pay rents. Don't expect your landlord to come and give you a calling bell. You will have to go and pay rents every month. That has been the well-settled law. But here under the new Act, the protection given is, number one, you should pay rents every month as per the agreement which you have agreed to with the landlord. If you don't pay, you will get a show cause notice from the tenant landlord saying that you have not paid rents for 2 months or 3 months. You please pay, failing which I will go to the rent court. Even after that, tenant does not pay, he still has another option to pay entire arrears within 30 days after service of notice. The eviction petition will be dismissed. So this, I think, is more than reasonable protection for any tenant. So he is already a defaulter. He does not need any protection, but still the Act has ensured that he is given sufficient protection. Here I would like to probably highlight the present COVID pandemic situation. Default, as we all know, is a burning issue now because of the COVID pandemic. Tenants, especially non-residential premises where lockdown is enforced, they are not able to run their businesses. What happens to their payment of rent? Can they claim a waiver? Can they claim a suspension? In fact, if you had noticed the newspaper and the news items, some of the advocates made a mention before the first bench, the Honorable Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India, asking for waiver of rents for their advocate chambers. Even at the mentioning stage, the Honorable Chief Justice refused, turned down the request and said, no, we can't do this. By this court cannot do it. Landlords may be very aged person, they may be depending on this rent. So we are not here to give you such concessions. So that was gone. Then similarly, before the Delhi High Court, in a CRP, a pending CRP, they call it LPA. The pending LPA matter had already been admitted. Stay was granted on certain conditions. Now this tenant, because of the COVID pandemic, could not comply with the conditional order of stay. So he came to the court, petition to modify, saying that you suspend the order, modify the order already passed. I am unable to pay the rents because I am unable to do business. The Delhi High Court went into great detail, and the learned single judge went into great detail, analyzed all the provisions of the Transfer of Property Act, the Contract Act, and the Delhi Rent Control Act and 1958, which is still in force. They have not adopted the Model Tenancy Act. So they are analyzing all that. They said, nothing doing, you have to pay the rent. Your liability to pay rent continues, rehearse the fact that you are temporarily in a position unable to occupy the property or do business. So even if force majeure clause was discussed. So force majeure clause, implications of section 56 of the Transfer of Property Act. So all these were threadbare discussed, a very wonderful judgment of the learned single judge. And he finally said nothing doing, but taking equitable consideration, the learned single judge gave some concession by deferring payment of the arrears. So if the tenant wanted to suspension or waiver, it is not possible, but on equity, the learned judge granted some time, breathing time for the tenant to pay the arrears by deferring payment and modifying the order suitably. Thereafter, division bench, where public interest litigation was filed by a non-residential tenant before the Delhi High Court. The division bench, number one, said we can't do this in a public interest petition because matter involves contractual terms of tenancy. We do not know, the landlords are not parties. We cannot lay down the law in this matter. And even passing remark, they also said that this, we do not know how landlords are also suffering. It's not only one-sided suffering. Tenants are no doubt suffering. Equally, landlords are also suffering because of the lockdown. Because residential leases, tenants may not have an excuse because they are more than now occupying the residential leases because they are not even going out of the house. So there cannot be any excuse for residential leases to cite force majeure or lockdown. But only issue where there may be cases where non-residential buildings, but taking a cue from the Delhi High Court judgment, I would say it is a very reasonable judgment and same should in all probabilities be made applicable.
One person wants the citation of the Mr. Balaji.
I don't think it is reported, sir. The Gaurav Jain's case.
Probably it will be in CDJ or something.
Nothing. It is not reported.
Nothing. Okay.
Live law. It is available in live law. You can read the entire judgment.
Okay. Fine.
Live law, it is available.
Okay.
Both the judgments are available. Learn single judge. In my Delhi High Court, you go to the website, you are able to trace.
You can see in the Judice. No?
Judice, yes.
Yeah.
So these only in Delhi this has happened. We don't know about the other states. And moreover, the Tamil Nadu government has not given the exemption for waiver of rents for normal tenancies. Only for migrant laborers, there was an exception given that landlord should not demand rent for the first lockdown period. Even that was not extended thereafter. So therefore, what the letter and spirit is, the terms of the agreement will govern. What now, there is an interesting question. The agreement itself provides for a clause, a force majeure clause. And the agreement is duly registered with the rent authority before the sub-registrar are concerned, because now we know non-residential leases, they don't take any chance. Big multinational companies, they ensure they don't mind paying the stamp duty. They go and register with the registrar office. They also ensure that the agreement is in place with the rent authority. What happens if, naturally, if this situation will come within the four corners of the terms of the agreement, if it is a general force majeure clause, I am afraid it may not come to the rescue of the tenant, because there are several judgments, including division bench judgments of our court from 1980 onwards, where they said unless there is total destruction of the property, tenant cannot claim. The temporary inability to use the premises will not be a ground to invoke force majeure clause or the provisions of the TP Act. Therefore, there will be total destruction of the property and tenant has to surrender the lease. If the tenant wants to continue, there is no question of invoking these clauses, is what the law is well settled. directly answered by the provisions themselves. The DP Act itself says there must be total destruction of the property or tenant must surrender and say you give back the advance. Then the problem, the question of whether the rent should be waived or not will arise, because he has given an offer saying I'm going to quit. I can't occupy the premises anymore. There's been damage. That situation does not arise in this COVID pandemic. So unless a situation like a COVID pandemic is expressly mentioned in the terms of agreement, my humble view is tenant cannot escape from the statutory duty of paying rents. Next ground is subletting. So this is so far as default. Subletting. Subletting, the earlier law is more or less incorporated. Without the written consent of the landlord, the tenant cannot part with possession of the entire premises or part of the premises. So parting with possession is again very important. So landlord still has to prove that the tenant has parted with possession and a stranger is put in occupation. The landlord is not required to prove the secret arrangement between the chief tenant and the subtenant. But the factum of possession changing hands of the entire premises, or at least a portion of the premises, has to be still proved by the landlord. And on owner's occupation, 21(2)(g). Again, here the landlord can ask for own use and occupation for himself or his member of his family. The interesting deviation from the old act is there because it was a control legislation. Fetters were put. If landlord was already occupying a residential building, he could not seek eviction of a tenant from a residential building. The landlord was in occupation of a non-residential building. He cannot seek recovery of possession of a non-residential building from the tenant. So these were the controls fetters under the old act. But under the new act, there is no such bar. If the landlord wants for his own occupation or the member of his family, he can make an application under 21(2)(g) and seek for recovery of possession. There's no, only the requirement has to be proved. There's no necessity to prove bona fides. Then we know the misuse of property. Under the old act, acts of waste, acts of nuisance. Under 10(2), we see 10(2)(3) and 10(2)(5) dealt with acts of waste and acts of nuisance. All these now are categorized under misuse of property. And misuse is also explained in section 21(2) also. Now it covers a case of even encroachment of additional area by the tenant. So it traverses beyond the leased premises also. Suppose landlord is in occupation of the remaining portion of the property. There are 2 shops in the ground floor. One shop alone is let out to the tenant. A tenant forcibly occupies the other shop which was under lock and key with the landlord. That is now a ground for eviction under misuse, which you could not have done under the old act. You should have gone only to the suit. Civil suit should have been filed saying that the trespass encroachment. I had let out only shop A, I had not let out shop B. You would have under section the provision of the DP Act, you may get possession by filing a civil suit. But here, encroachment of additional space not let out originally is a ground for eviction. This is a very interesting provision. Nuisance again is available to the nuisance committed by the tenant is a ground for eviction. So misuse, illegal, or suppose the tenant does illegal business or immoral trade, all these will come under misuse. Ceasing to occupy is not expressly mentioned. The ground of ceasing to occupy, which was available under the old act, where the tenant, except in places where the hill station, in all other places, the tenant did not occupy or put to use the tenanted premises for a continuous period of 4 months without reasonable cause. That was ground for eviction. But this ground has not been specifically mentioned. Probably we'll have to see if this can be brought within the mischief under misuse, within the category of misuse. That is again one thing. Then the other grounds are demolition, reconstruction for repairs. Usual clause. 14 has been now incorporated. So 10 and 14 are now clubbed together under 21. So 14 under the old act was demolition, reconstruction. That was also now under 21(2). So all grounds of eviction are now encompassed under section 21(2). Old 10 and old 14 are now section 21 with some grounds available, some grounds not available. And denial of title is not a ground. Under the old act, section 10(1) gave a right to a landlord to evict a tenant who denies the title of the landlord, and denial was not bona fide. So this was the only requirement the rent controller had to decide. There is a denial. Denial was bona fide or not. If it is not bona fide, it's a ground for eviction. Denial was bona fide, landlord has to go to the civil court. Here, denial of title is not made available as a ground for eviction. Probably the only reason that I can visualize is because it is the act itself revolves around the contract entered into the parties. So when there is an express written contract, the tenant cannot say he is not my landlord. That is probably the only reason why denial of title is excluded from the grounds of eviction. And additional two new grounds, interesting grounds are where suppose there is a change of user. As I said, there is a new master plan. The landlord wants to exploit that. He wants to change the user from residential. He wants to build a school or a hospital. That is a ground for eviction. If the rules permit a change of use and landlord for that ground wants eviction, he can now move the court. So it more or less, it may involve demolition reconstruction. It may not involve demolition reconstruction. He may put the same structure to use for commercial. A residential building can be put to use for commercial because the law now permits. The property now stands transferred to mixed residential zone. Therefore, I can build something which is permissible there or use the property for something which is permissible. So this is an additional ground. Yet another additional ground is, suppose tenant himself has issued a notice. Tenant has a right under the Act to surrender possession. So if he feels he does not want to continue, landlord's the period of tenancy is over, landlord wants the exorbitant increase in rent, tenant does not want to pay that, either he has an option to surrender or he will face the music under section 21. Therefore, tenant who surrenders gives a notice to the landlord saying that I am going to vacate by end of December. On that assurance, the landlord agrees to sell the property. Then tenant does not vacate. That is a ground for eviction. So if tenant goes back on his own undertaking to vacate, to surrender lease, but he does not do so, landlord can say on that premise, I have decided to deal with the property. Now I'm stuck, I'm unable to proceed. Give me eviction. This is an additional ground. Then revision of rent is only in terms of the tenancy agreement. As I said, there is no fair rent. The revision of rent, you are guided only by what is agreed between the parties. Who will decide if there is a dispute? It will be by the rent authority. The rent authority we saw, he will now first register the agreement. Number two, deposit of rents. If there is a refusal, which I'll come to it next. Revision of rent. Suppose there is a dispute. There is an agreement that has been duly registered with the rent authority. The tenant, probably choice of words, he gives a different interpretation. He says, no, this increase is available only after 3 months, not now. That dispute, the rent authority can decide. Here again, a lot of confusion arose. They thought because the power of revision of rent is bestowed, conferred on the rent authority, would it not amount to fixation of fair rent? No. In fact, by 39 of 2018, the amendment, the position was made very clear. They said rent authority can revise the rent only in terms of the tenancy agreement between the parties. So that inclusion has now set at rest the confusion. That is one. So rent authority can revise the rent only in terms of the contract. Yet another important feature is security deposit and advance. Under the old Act, section 7 encompassed any kind of payment which should come under the term advance. You may call it security deposit, you may call it refundable security deposit, you may call it rental advance. It will still come under section 7, and there was an embargo on the landlords to not collect rent for more than exceeding 1 month's rent as advance. We all know the famous case, Narasimha Rao's case in 1996, 2 CTC, page 78. The Honorable Supreme Court, 3 judges, they said they settled the law. There was some confusion due diverging judgment views taken by the Madras High Court. They said tenant should opt for adjustment of rents. Landlord cannot adjust. Only the tenant opts, and landlord has got to adjust all that. Supreme Court settled the law and said, no, as long as you have an excess advance of more than 1 month, you are bound to adjust. You need not wait for a tenant to ask you for such adjustment. You are bound to adjust excess advance. You can hold only 1 month's rent as advance before you file an eviction petition on the ground of default. Here, section 11 says, save an agreement to the contrary, it shall be unlawful to receive security deposit in excess of 3 months' rent. So the opening words of section 11 is very, very important. save an agreement to the contrary. So here again, the contract between the parties is respected. If myself and Srinivas Raghavan sir accept, I will pay 6 months rent to him. I am bound by it. I cannot invoke section 11 and say there is a violation. He has collected, it's an offense to collect more than 3 months rent as security deposit. He cannot say. I cannot say, because it says, starts opening words of section 11 is save an agreement to the contrary. What happened here was, as I told you, 2017 Model Tenancy Act, the 2019 Model Tenancy Act also suggested, because except Tamil Nadu, no other state has so far adopted the Model Tenancy Act. The first state, and so far we remain the only state who have adopted the Model Tenancy Act of 2015 and brought it in tune with 2017 Tenancy Act. In 2019 Model Tenancy Act, the central government reduced this 3 months to 1 month. And this save an agreement to the contrary also has been removed. So we did not bother about the Model Tenancy Act of 2019 because we are now already, the Act of 2017 has come into operation insofar as Tamil Nadu is concerned. We are governed only by Section 11 of the new Act as it stands today. The Model Tenancy Act, which has been suggested in 2019, is not going to affect the tenancies in Tamil Nadu. Therefore, an agreement will be respected. If there is no agreement, security deposit not exceeding 3 months. Then advance is sought to be differentiated from security deposit. Under this Act, you can receive advance as agreed between the parties. It can be 6 months, 9 months, 1 year. I can receive rental advance. It only requires the consent of the parties. There is no law saying you cannot collect in excess of 1 month or 3 months. Only security deposit, if there is a cap, that too when the agreement is signed. For rental advance, there is no cap. So parties are free to negotiate and fix the rental advance, which is payable by the tenant in respect of a tenancy under the old Act. Yet another interesting addition in the new Act is liability to pay interest. Under the old Act, we have seen agreements where there is a clause saying that if there is any arrears or default, tenant will be liable to pay some interest for delayed payment. We have seen a number of agreements. Courts have dismissed eviction petitions on the ground of willful default, saying landlord has himself given a right to the tenant to accumulate. He can pay interest and get away. Therefore, there is no question of willfulness. So here now under the new Act, you are free to fix an interest for delayed payment of rents. The Act has, under the rules, it has been capped at 8% per annum. Again, the rule says saves an agreement to the contrary. So if parties agree and negotiate on 12 months or 12% interest or 9% interest, the tenant is bound to pay. The liability is also cast on the landlords when there is a failure to refund the advance or security deposit. If the tenant comes forward to hand over vacant possession, the landlord delays or refuses, in that case, the landlord will have to refund with 8% interest. So gone are the days where we put refund without interest-free refundable security deposit. You can now modify saying that there is an interest portion component in case of delay or either default committed by the landlord or by the tenant. So this interest component is again a very interesting feature. And restoration of amenities, the scope of amenities has been expanded. Under the old Act, because it was a wartime measure, 1960, I wanted to control and give relief to tenants at that situation, at that prevailing time during the World War II time. But now the scope of amenities also has expanded. Lifts, we have seen lifts for most of the buildings. They are on flats, come with lifts these days. So therefore, lifts are now brought under essential amenities. Car parking facilities and staircases, lights in passages, all these are now brought within essential amenities and supply of services, which earlier we saw only water, electricity and drainage. These were the three basic amenities which alone, if disrupted, the tenant could approach and seek for restoration. Now interestingly, even a landlord can approach the rent authority. The restoration of amenities only before the rent authority. Even a landlord can approach the rent authority complaining of a disruption of essential supply by the tenant. For example, landlord and tenant occupy the same building. The first floor, the tenant is occupying the ground floor. He locks the lift. Landlord is unable to use the lift. He can approach the rent authority and under section 20 and get the amenity or supply, essential supply restored. Again, the section 20 sets out what are the amenities under the explanation. That is one additional feature. Yet another feature is compensation for case of non-vacancy. Section 23. Section 23 is compensation for double the rent. It gives the right to the landlord to claim double the rent in the event of the tenant not vacating in spite of notice, in spite of the lapse of the agreement or termination of the agreement, or by order of the rent court. The three scenarios, if the tenant does not comply, the landlord can demand double the rent. So that is again a fetter, the Damocles sword hanging over the tenant. So if I'm going to overstay, I'm running the risk of paying, suppose I'm paying 10,000, I'll run the risk of paying 20,000. So therefore, that is again probably a check and balance to ensure that the tenant does not unnecessarily drag the proceeding. Section 23. Section 25 is like the old section 11. But here, two exceptions seem to create some trouble for landlords also. If you see section 25, it is concerning payment of rent during the eviction proceedings. So tenant is bound to pay rent during the eviction proceedings. Landlord at any stage can take out an application and ask the rent court to direct the tenant to pay. Under the old Act, 11(4) was amounting to a very, I would say, a shortcut. Landlord can invoke section 11(4) at any stage. Rent controller will pass an order to direct the tenant to pay the rent. The tenant does not pay the rent. The court has the power to stop further proceedings and straight away order eviction. That is not available under section 25, interestingly. So the remedy open to the landlord is only to execute it under section 39, like an interim decree. Say probably under order 12, rule 6, we get a preliminary decree. Something like that he can invoke. 11(4) is not made attracted to section 25. Yet another, I would say, disturbing feature, maybe a strong word. Two exceptions have been carved out to section 25. When eviction is sought under 21(2)(a) and 21(2)(b), that is on the ground of failure to enter into a tenancy agreement and on the ground of default, 25 cannot be invoked. That is the language of section 25, except in cases of clauses A and B of section 21, subsection 2 of section 21. All other cases, payment of rent during eviction proceedings is permissible. The landlord comes to court on the ground of default, complaining of default. He gives a pre-suit notice. Tenant has an option to pay. Within 30 days, he does not pay. He has an option to pay after the proceedings are filed, numbered. He gets notice 30 days, he does not pay. Still, the landlord is helpless. He cannot file an application under section 25 because there's an express bar. I don't know the wisdom of the legislature, why they excluded 21(2)(a). Probably 21(2)(a) we can justify because there is no agreement. Therefore, probably, but even here again, see, time consumed for all the proceedings is going to be the same. Be it 21(2)(g) or 21(2)(b) or 21(2)(a) or 21(2)(d), the eviction span of proceedings is going to be the same. Therefore, to deny the landlord the arrears of rent, in so far as two grounds alone are concerned, I think this is a question which is going to be debated before the courts. Then I told you already about 26 and 27. Here again, 26 and 27 are regarding the building additional structures and vacant sites. In 27, the rent court has the power to revise rent because the tenant is going to be deprived of enjoyment. Originally, he was enjoying the entire bungalow with 5 grounds vacant land. Now, landlord is going to snatch away 3 grounds. His enjoyment is going to be limited to 2 grounds. So, still, tenant cannot be expected to pay the old rent, which he was paying for 5 grounds. The rent court can decide what is the rent payable after such severance and vacant land is given to the landlord. But similar provision is not available on 26, where the landlord is entitled to build additional structures. Here again, tenant is definitely going to be inconvenienced. His enjoyment of the common amenities is going to be shared with new people. Suppose 2 floors are constructed, but 26 does not provide for reduction of rent as provided under section 27. So this probably should be taken care of by the inherent powers which are vested with the rent courts. Again, here coming to the powers of the rent court, CPC is not made applicable. Expressly, CPC, provisions of CPC are not made applicable to the procedure. But interestingly, all the powers of the civil court are vested with the rent court and the rent tribunal. So the courts and tribunals are vested with powers of the civil court under CPC, but insofar as procedure, they are at liberty to regulate, formulate their own procedure. This is a very interesting feature. So powers and procedure are different, which you will have to keep in mind. So powers of civil court to decide matters, to let in evidence, to permit reopen, recall, review, all those are powers. The procedure, Order 21, procedure. It is like tried, we know order for section 47 tried like a suit. So that procedure is not made available to the conduct of proceedings before the rent court, the rent tribunal, including execution proceedings. And as you have seen, all these come with a price tag. There are loads of benefits for landlords under the new act, no doubt, but all these come with a price. Gone are the days where we pay 5 rupees, 15 rupees court fee. Now section 41 ropes in section 43 of the Tamil Nadu Court Fees and Suits Valuation Act and requires an eviction petition to be valued like how suits between landlords and tenants are valued under section 43 of the Tamil Nadu Court Fees and Suits Valuation Act. Honorable Justice Sampath's committee has given a breather. The 7.5% has now come down to 3.5%, 3%.
3%.
So now 3%. So the court fee which is payable for any eviction petition is 1 year's rent immediately payable by tenant preceding immediately after next 12 months.
Oh, after.
Next 12 months payable. So invariably it will be the last rent which was paid by the tenant or payable by the tenant. Though the wording is immediately payable after next 12 months. That is what the wording of section 43 of the Court Fees Act is concerned. So invariably it will boil down to the rent which was last paid or payable by the tenant. So one annual 12 months rent, 3% will be the court fee. And if you see the forms, there are particular forms, manner in which you have to move the eviction rent court for eviction, for deposit of rents, for restoration of amenities. If you see the form, there is a column provided for interim relief. So will this interim relief entitle the landlord to seek recovery of arrears of rent? He may not, his hands are tied under section 25 in 2 cases. So this I want all you advocates to put on your thinking caps and think whether he can come under the interim relief category and seek for arrears of rent. Bypass 25. He cannot file an application under 25 pending proceedings. But suppose there is a case where at the inception there is huge arrears. Will the landlord not be entitled to take advantage of the form? I think it is form 5. Form 5. Form 5 section 7, para 7 says, interim order if any prayed for pending final decision on the application, the applicant seeks the following interim reliefs. Would he be entitled? What is the court fee payable? If suppose the landlord invokes his interim relief and says there is 1 crore arrears, will court fee be payable on that claim? So all these are not answered under the act. These are questions which are at large as the proceedings progress.
Mr. Balaji.
Yes, please.
Section 42 and 3 speaks of interlocutory application. Does it include? That's what. It does not speak of the rent court.
Not before the rent court.
So it's a debatable point.
Before the rent court and rent tribunal, we don't know what.
We don't know what is the court fee payable.
This is a grey area which I found.
Yeah.
And yet another ground, if you see 40, section 40 with jurisdiction of the court. 34 and 40 can be seen together. Section 34 sets out the jurisdiction of the court. So the court is not bound by CPC, but it shall give respect to the provisions of the Transfer of Property Act and the Indian Contract Act, give due regard. So the rent court is entitled to invoke provisions of TP Act and Contract Act by deciding matters. And now coming to section 40, jurisdiction of courts is barred in certain matters. So you cannot go to civil court, fair enough. But 42 interdicts. 42 says it is limited to the tenancy agreement submitted to it as per first schedule, and question of title and ownership shall be beyond its jurisdiction. That is again fair enough. But saying that it will be limited to the agreement submitted to the rent authority, what happens to section 21(2)(a)? The act itself envisages a case where there is no agreement. It is a ground for eviction. Then if you invoke section 42, the rent court will lose jurisdiction. to even try 21(2)(a). So that cannot be the interpretation given. And that was the interesting point which was taken up before the Justice Honorable Suresh Kumar in Mani Meghalai's case, where number of petitions were filed not numbered only because of this reason, because Form 1 requires the TR number to be mentioned. The Form 5 requires TR number to be mentioned. That is the registration number provided by the rent authority. Many cases, agreements were there, written agreements were there, but for some reason, non-cooperation, agreements could not be registered. Even today, where everything is proper, uploaded, rent authority is yet to give a TR number. Can the landlord or the tenant wait indefinitely and not approach the court just because of this lacuna? So this was the argument put forth before Justice Suresh Kumar. That was a case where the tenant was already in huge arrears and my eviction petition was not numbered because it was not registered as mandated in section 4. 4A was put against me by the registry. 4A says effect of non-registration. No agreement. 49. Now here section 49 of Registration Act has been verbatim incorporated 4A. But curiously, the exceptions, provisos to section 49 are omitted. So even for collateral purpose, cannot be looked into. There are two exceptions in the section 49 of Registration Act. One is specific performance suit. Number 2, collateral purpose, the court has got power. If it is a purpose is collateral. Here, the exception collateral purpose is taken away. Evidentiary value, that is retained, but it is the agreement shall have no legal effect. Other provisions of 49 are intact, imported. So it more or less creates a deadlock situation. Landlord cannot go anywhere. I cannot go to the DP Act because there is a special enactment. There is provisions where I can invoke eviction without even an agreement, 21(2)(a). And by calling upon a tenant who is already a defaulter for 3 years, will a landlord be comfortable giving him another lease of life? See, already the tenant has not paid rent for 3 years. If I have to enter into an agreement as contemplated in 4(2), register with the rent authority, he is going to bargain for a minimum period of 11 months. So I am virtually stabbing myself. The next 11 months I am depriving myself of the rent if I go call upon such a tenant to come and register the agreement. That is one problem. There is the vice versa case. Old tenants, landlords are now trying to take advantage of this fair rent going away. Now the fair rent concept goes, fair and fixed under the old act also has no sanctity. I can straight away say you come and register. For example, in T Nagar, Pandi Bazaar, several tenants are suffering. Fair rent was fixed way back in 70s, 80s. They were paying about 10,000, 12,000 for 500 square feet, 600 square feet shop. Today, the landlord wants 8 lakhs rent per month, 4 lakhs rent per month. He says this is the market value, pay or get out. There is also a possibility of landlord taking advantage of 21(2)(a) and say there is no agreement, get out. There has to be a balance struck. So what happens if such tenant is shut out? These factors definitely will have to be taken care of. Then coming to section 4 capital A again, if you see the wording of section 4A, effect of non-registration. So no document required to be registered on subsection 3 of section 4 shall, unless it has been registered, affect any immovable property comprised therein, or confer any power to adopt, or be received in evidence of any transaction affecting such property or conferring any right. So this is verbatim section 49 of the Registration Act minus the proviso and exception. So what happens in such cases where non-cooperation of parties, either the landlord or the tenant, the other party is being deprived. The other party, if there is a written agreement, he can voluntarily go and register with the rent authority. There may be cases where it is on basis of trust, several agreements, tenancy agreements are continuing for 40 years, 50 years. Now landlords with a view to evict these tenants, old tenants, and let it out for higher rents. There is a possibility which safeguards have to be taken, which we don't know how the courts are going to interpret. Fortunately, Justice Suresh Kumar said, as long as you want to invoke section 21, these are statutory grounds available to a landlord. Therefore, 21(2)(a) provides a case for eviction where there is no agreement. Therefore, similarly, other grounds also should be made available to a landlord. You cannot refuse to number the petition just because your tenancy agreement is not registered. But at the same time, caution the court saying that you cannot rely upon the terms of the agreement. If suppose landlord wants to invoke a particular term or condition in the agreement and seek eviction, he is disentitled to do because it is not registered. That is the effect. And he further, learned judge also further went on to hold that it is the tenant's risk. If he is not, if he is going to take up a defense of non-registration, it is his risk which he has to take out during the proceedings. So this is a lacuna which probably is going to hit hard on some tenants, I'm sure, which will have to be taken care of by the court, because statute does not seem to provide an answer to such cases where 21(2)(a), 4(2), especially 4(2), the only 4(2) which is a ground for eviction. 4(3) is not a ground for eviction. Suppose an agreement expires after the commencement of the act, it is not made a ground for eviction. The failure to enter into an agreement where there is no agreement on the date of commencement of the act is 4(2). That alone provides a ground for eviction or a ground for termination of tenancy by either the tenant or the landlord. This is going to be very interesting, where we have to see how the courts are going to deal with these matters. Then rent tribunals. So as I told you, finality of orders. So being brought in with laudable objects of disposing of matters, giving quietus at the earliest possible to landlord-tenant disputes. Time frames have been fixed. We will have to see how the courts are functioning, how lawyers cooperate, litigants cooperate, because we have seen several acts. Consumer Protection Act was brought in with similar laudable objects, disposed of within a particular time frame, but it never happened. So unless the parties and litigants and the advocates cooperate, the courts are not going to be probably, I would say, they will be entitled to dispose of only with the cooperation of the parties. But this will, again, time factor is a big question mark. We'll have to see if they're able to keep line with the time schedule set out in the Act. Then deposit of rents. 8(5) under the old Act, Section 14 under the new Act. Interestingly, the only place where bona fide is used is Section 14. Bona fide was the entire letter and spirit of the old Act, and it came for eviction on the ground of owner's occupation or demolition, reconstruction. But under the new Act, bona fide term is used only under Section 14, where the landlord refuses to receive rent for a consecutive period of 2 months, or tenant has a bona fide dispute or doubt as to who is the landlord. Suppose original landlord died, there is a rival claim between the legal heirs. Then the tenant can approach the rent authority. So deposit of rents is also before the rent authority. He can approach the rent authority and seek to deposit rents. And gone are the days where you have to scrupulously follow money order, 10 days, bank account, call upon the tenant to call upon landlord to give a bank account number, wait for 10 days, then send the money order, deduct commission. Now the Act provides the tenant to send even by RTGS or NEFT. So any electronic mode is also recognized as a proper payment. This is again an interesting point. Then what happens in cases of maintenance and the other charges? So now rent includes other charges payable also. It is not only the rent component, but the amenities which are also payable by the tenant also is included, encompassed within the category of rent. So if even if there is a default in payment of the other charges, the landlord can invoke Section 25 or Section 21 and say, you not only paid the entire rent, you not paid the other charges which you agreed to pay. Probably there may be special charges for using the lift, the water. All these charges also, it attracts payment of interest if the agreement provides, or the landlord can seek the available remedy and say 8% is the rent, which interest which you will have to pay. And like the old Act, even under this Act, under Section 13, the landlord has to give receipts to the tenants for payment of rent. We have seen property manager. 18 and 19 deal with the new concept of property manager. So property manager is entitled to what are the powers and roles of the property manager. The landlord is required to inform the rent authority and the tenant about the property manager if he has engaged the property manager. The Section 19 deals with the role and responsibilities of the property manager. So he can collect rents on behalf of the landlord. He can inspect the premises. He can maintain the premises, issue notices for payment of rent in case of arrears, issue notice to a tenant to asking him to call upon to vacate the premises, or call him upon to renew the tenancy. So all these are in the domain of the property manager. So he is one step above an agent, not merely agent representing the landlord. He is one step above the agent, and property manager is only for the landlord. The rules define an agent. Rules specifically define an agent to be the power agent of the principal. So even a tenant can have an agent. He can still represent the tenant in the proceedings before the court, but he will not come under the category of property manager because he is a glorified agent which is available only to the landlord. So property manager concept is new. We have seen section 20. 21 is eviction. Appeals, as I told you, the appeals rent court is now also an appellate court. Rent tribunal and the rent courts are now required to dispose of matters expeditiously, and their orders are treated to be final. So these are the broad structure of the new act. And somebody asked me if after seeing both the acts, is it old wine in new bottle? I said no, it is new wine in old bottle.
Old bottle.
Structure is retained. The definitions of landlord, tenant, everything is retained. Definition of tenant is retained. Definition of landlord is retained. And building definition is retained. It is now called premises, not building. Therefore, it is new wine in old bottle. We'll have to see how the act is going to be implemented. There are gray areas which I have discussed with you just now. We'll have to rethink on all these issues. These may be issues which judges will have to soon decide one way or the other and settle them, unless and until and here again by Act 3 of 2020, Section 4.2 has been amended this year, extending the time for entering into tenancy under 4.2 by 575 days. So which is available for another next one month and 10 days. September 20th will be the last day before which Section 4.2 has to be complied with. So where there is no agreement prior to the date of commencement of the Act, you can enter into an agreement and register it before the 20th of September this year. So that is Act 3 of 2020. This is the amendment which came in 2020. In all other respects, there is not much amendment, except for extending the time. And otherwise, the rules have been amended suitably to allow registration up to 575 days. So I think more or less I've covered all main aspects. Any questions I'm willing to answer.
Let me be the first question. So there is a tenants agreement in force. When the tenants agreement has just expired, the landlord also expelled in a road accident.
Landlord?
Expelled in a road accident. Tenancy agreement came into end. The same month, he also died in a road accident. His son is in US. He is not in a position to come to India for obvious reasons, citing pandemic and other reasons. His wife is in the hospital. She is in a serious condition, but she is conscious. But she is unwilling to execute this tenancy agreement. So on one hand, the tenant is ready to go for a renewal or execution of a fresh tenancy agreement. On the other hand, the original landlord is no more. His son is not in a position to be approached. His wife is unwilling. What is the course open to the tenant?
So Section 5 will alone come to the rescue of the tenant. He has 6 months time to negotiate with the wife or the son and enter into a fresh agreement.
And almost 1.5 years is over after the death of the
landlord. So
it is yet to be renewed.
As long as the eviction proceedings are not initiated, tenant.
Suppose tomorrow if the wife comes and goes for eviction proceeding, the tenant has got no defense at all.
No.
Or no fault on his part. There should be a provision of in case of refusal or non-cooperation on the part of the landlord.
Unfortunately, it is not there because the contract is thought to be respected. At the end of the period, if suppose the contract provides for extension, tenant can invoke. If suppose the expired tenancy had a covenant saying that it will be extended for further period of 2 years or 1 year on the same terms or on condition 10% increase.
Yeah.
If then the tenant can take advantage of that agreement and seek for. Otherwise, 5, 3, 6 months, it will give a ground for eviction.
So if it is not renewed, it is once for all, it is closed. The tenant has got no right.
That is definitely going to be a hardship for number of tenants. Landlords may see, but normally, sir, I have seen landlords who are happy with tenants, they will continue.
They may not go for another tenant who is unknown.
Somebody will read them saying, 12 years, I did not right to go to property, advice given, they will come to us advocates and say, I want eviction. Reason get a 1 Rosha. It is not a ground. You need not worry, as long as tenant is paying rent, you need not worry, your right is secure, title is secure. So number of 90% landlords are happy to respect the agreement with the tenant.
Known devil and unknown angel. Exploit. And second question is this. I have seen an opinion of an advocate. The advocate has given an opinion stating that when there is no tenancy agreement, civil court has got jurisdiction.
Bar, straight away bar, section 40.
That's what section 40 is very.
Act bar's jurisdiction of civil court.
Civil court. No, since the section 5, since it says it is limited only to tenancy agreement, he has done interpretation stating that when there is no agreement, the court has got.
42 cannot be read with 41.
41.
Should be read independent of 41.
Independently, or not with Talaq.
41 by itself is a rule. Our
Okay.
21-2A value liya. 21-2A when court is comfort the power to guard revision when there is no agreement. So where
Yeah.
42 it's watered down straight away.
Okay. And one is Innisay advocate has got it out.
Sir, can we invoke the new Rent Act for eviction if the High Court declares tenant as illegal possession? The possession of the tenant is declared as illegal, sir.
No, you cannot find. The definition of tenant excludes a tenant who has suffered an order of eviction also. அதனால நீங்க பழைய ஆக்ட்ல எவிக்ஷன் ஆர்டர் ஆயிருந்து டெனன்ட் ஆர்சிஏ பெண்டிங்கா இருந்தா கூட you cannot treat him as a tenant under the new act. So when the High Court has said he is not a tenant, where the question he can be a person holding over. Tenancy period முடிஞ்சு if he continues he is a person tenant holding over.
No,
he will come. He will come within the definition of tenant, but not an illegal tenant.
Sir, actually it is a case of specific performance, sir.
Yes.
Where they came inside the campus by way of illegal means.
This varaz, madam. Definitely, you have to go only to the civil court.
Then
you
what
cannot
is
invoke the provisions of this act. You can ask for damages for use and occupation.
Suit for eviction.
Suit.
No, what happened, Balaji, what happened? The suit of specific performance. The defendant has inducted his daughter into possession. While dismissing the suit on various grounds, the court is given a finding that right or wrong, you have admitted the possession of the daughter of the defendant in your written statement. So he cannot be just thrown out. So you can just see that he is out of possession by following the due process.
Due process.
So he has to file a suit for eviction or
For
ejectment.
recovery of possession.
No, recovery of possession, not for not under the Tamil Nadu regulation of act. He will never be found to be a tenant under the law. The doubt she raised.
He will not fall under the definition. So act will not apply.
By following the decree of the High Court, which confirms the degree of the trial court, we will have to file a suit for recovery of
For
possession.
recovery of possession.
And thereafter an EP.
Yes.
Madam?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, right. Mr. Bharat Ramasamy, you can unmute yourself.
I had one question. If
Yes.
tenant has not paid for 6 months, and now before approaching Mr. Balaji, when we approach the tenant, he is telling, I have invested 20 lakhs on interiors on this house, so I will not vacate. So will that be a valid
No,
argument
sir.
in front of court?
It is not a difference. Even under the old act, there was never a difference. The tenant,
Okay.
whatever he spends for his business or his comforts, cannot be put against the landlord. The law is well settled. Even the new act does not confer any special right on the tenants.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
That was the question.
Okay, there is one Vaiju Mohan.
Yes.
I just want to know, you have said that agreement has to be registered before the registration authorities.
Yes.
But what is the procedure we have to follow? Can you explain how it should be registered? This
Yes,
is a
yes, it is.
process.
Yes, it is an online procedure. Registration with the rent authority is an online process. Like how you apply for registration for online registration of documents like a sale deed or settlement deed, you will have to go into the website of the Tamil Nadu government. If you just type TNHUD, Tamil Nadu Housing Urban Department, TNHUD in Google, it will straight take you to the tenancy site. There you create an ID, personal ID for yourself, like how you create a Yahoo ID or a Gmail ID. You create an ID for yourself. Once you create an ID and password, you log inside the website. It will ask you for application for new tenancy. Then you can enter the details of the landlord, details of the tenant, the details of the rental agreement. Once you upload everything, 100 rupees is charged for the user fee. That is the only charge you will have to pay for registering with the rent authority. It will be a sum of rupees 100. It has to be paid online only. No stamp paper. By debit card or credit card, you will have to pay. And your registration will be kept pending. The rent authority will scrutinize your documents and probably call you for inspection of the production of original documents for verification. If it is a registered lease agreement already with the sub-registrar, the rent authority dispenses with verification of documents because it's already being scrutinized by a government authority. So they don't call. Otherwise, you have to go and produce the documents. After that, your tenancy agreement will be registered. TR number will be given. That process will complete.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vijay. Mr. C. Nadarajan wants to ask a question. Sir, he wants you to explain the court fee once again.
Your court fee question I can answer. The rent authority kita court fee is like any application before the civil court. What court fee you pay on applications, same court fee before the rent authority. When you seek for eviction before the rent court, court fee is as per section 43 of the Tamil Nadu Court Fees and Suits Valuation Act 1955, as amended by Act 2017, 6 of 2017, where the rent which is payable immediately for the next 12 months will have to be calculated, and 3% of that aggregate will be the court fee payable for an eviction petition.
Thank
You
you,
can
sir.
combine grounds. You can combine two grounds. Court fee will still be payable only for 3%. You can combine even 3 grounds or 4 grounds. You need not file 4 petitions. You can combine 4 grounds available to you for eviction. Court fee will still be 3% of 1 year's rent.
Mr. Sandeep Shah.
Now, these
Yes.
bona fides they have taken away.
Yes, totally taken away.
Don't you feel that now landlords will be more unreasonable in extracting money from the tenants?
See, as I told you, most of the landlords are happy with the tenants as long as tenants are paying rent promptly. They are not greedy. There is some section of landlords who may exploit the situation. You are right. There are some sections of landlord who may exploit.
Then second thing is, now tenancy they have fixed the period.
Yes,
Now once they take for example non-residential purpose,
correct.
once the tenant establishes his goodwill in one particular place, then
Yes.
the landlord will again behave unreasonably to extract more money, because he knows that it will be difficult for tenant to go out of this premises and establish his goodwill in the new premise.
Correct. Very true. Very true.
Then in those cases, the act is very
Definitely loaded in favor of landlord only.
Yeah.
But as I said, see, there is a window for tenants to be smart. Like how you get very reasonable protection under willful default, not willful default. Your tenant is smart enough and contemplates a reasonable period of lease and gets it clinched, duly registered. Landlord cannot evict him.
But that is suppose if everything goes well.
Yes,
Suppose if there is some problem or some other development, then
Yes.
the act has not given
correct.
any protection to the tenant.
Definitely.
And what is the impact, ultimate impact of Justice Suresh Kumar's judgment?
See, as of now, see, he has clearly laid down the law. Invocation of section 21 is not a bar merely because an agreement is not registered. So therefore, definitely 21 you can invoke as long as you come under any of the grounds under section 21 and file an eviction petition.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Mr. Srikanth.
இந்த charitable institutions இது ஓபன் ஆயிடுச்சு, அது நோட்டிபிகேஷன் வந்துருச்சு, அது எப்படி அது?
இல்ல சார், section 3 ல வந்து exemption இருக்கும். Under section 3 it carves out exemptions from the applicability of the act. There are cases where express trust, in the case of trust there is an express exclusion already. Trust, Indian Trust Act, Waqf Act, Waqfs registered in the Waqf Act are exempted from provisions of the act. But an option is given for exempted landlords to say we want protection, we want to invoke the provisions of the act. He can do so. He just has to inform the rent authority and register the tenancy agreement. So an option is given to landlords to waive the exemption and invoke the provisions of this act. But the power of the government to exempt charitable and other institutions, there is no GO so far. Like GOMS 2000 under the Tamil Nadu Act 18 of 1960, no GO has so far come under the new act. Therefore, today this act will apply.
This act will apply. So the registration with the rent authority is mandatory.
Mandate.
சரி. செகண்ட், இப்போ டிபி நம்பர்ஸ் நம்ம அப்ளை பண்றோம் ஆன்லைன்ல, டிஆர் நம்பர் அப்ளை பண்றோம், பட் தே கீப் இட் பெண்டிங் ஃபார் மோர் தென் 4 to 5 months. அப்போ
that is why I said
சுரேஷ் குமார் சார் ஜட்மெண்ட்ல வந்து சுரேஷ் குமார் ஜட்மெண்ட்ல வந்து யூ கேன் ஃபைல் பெட்டிஷன் சொல்றாங்க. பட் பெட்டிஷன்ல வந்து ஆக்ட்ல வந்து ரெஜிஸ்ட்ரேஷன் மேண்டேட்டரின்னு ஒரு கிளாஸ் வருது. Filing is one thing, numbering is another thing. Whether that registration is mandatory, appo next final
registration definitely is the mandatory. No doubt that registration is mandatory. Act best advice as lawyers we can give to landlords and tenants is to negotiate, hard clinch agreement for the whatever period you want, including terms of tenancy, increase in rent. எல்லாமே contemplate பண்ணி water tight agreement இருந்தா both parties are safe. But if at all there is a failure, then it is big risk.
21 ஏக்கர்ல நம்ம ரெஜிஸ்ட்ரேஷனுக்கு வரலாம்னு சொல்லி சொன்னா பெட்டிஷன் போடலாம்னு சொல்லி இருக்கு.
Yes.
But next condition வரப்போ registration is also mandatory ன்னு வருது. See, old agreements will not be having their Aadhaar card or PAN card.
Correct, to register. It is going to be definitely going to be thorn in the flesh, which either the legislature has to come to the rescue of parties and amend suitably, or courts will definitely step in to interpret the provisions.
Thank you. And there is one question, Mr. Balaji, about the property manager.
Yes.
They asked me whether do they require any formal application by the before the rent court and to get it allowed by the like a power of attorney holder, or it's a mere asking, or it's only a matter of right of the landlord.
Section 18 says the landlord should inform the tenant about the property manager. That's all.
So he has got power to issue notice and regulate the eviction procedure.
Yes.
And he take part in the court proceedings.
Yes, he can.
Question.
Because he is definitely an agent. He is definitely an agent of the landlord.
He acts as the agent of the landlord.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. There is one Miss Savitri Iyer.
I asked you that question. See, supposing I submit the agreement before the rent authority without registering it under the Indian Registration Act. So, which is the first agreement that has to be submitted for registration? Is there any condition for that?
Here there is a clash. Under the Registration Act, from the date of execution of the agreement, we have 4 months time to register the agreement.
Correct.
But here there is a period of 90 days from the date of execution of the agreement. You will have to register with the rent authority.
Okay.
When you register before the rent authority, one of the drop-down options is, have you registered with the sub-registrar?
So if I do it later,
therefore, ideally, I would suggest you register with the sub-registrar first, then upload the details with the rent authority. You will have to do it within a period of 90 days. So you are foregoing 30 days, which is available in the Registration Act, by adopting this process.
okay, irrespective of the term of the agreement.
Yes, irrespective of the term of agreement, it has to be registered with the rent authority.
And also,
and the Registration Act, there is, in fact, the full bench of the Madras High Court 1921, they said any agreement in writing has to be registered. But in practice, we have given a go-by to this. We conveniently say Section 17, we take advantage, 11 need not be registered, which is in fact a myth. The TP Act is very clear. Section 107, any lease in writing has to be registered. If you see Section 49 of the Registration Act, it contemplates registration in 2 cases, in 2 scenarios. If it is registrable under the provisions of the Registration Act, or registrable under the provisions of the Transfer of Property Act. So the Transfer of Property Act requires registration of any written agreement, irrespective of the period. Actually, we have to register with the sub-registrar and also the rent authority.
okay, thanks a lot,
But
Balaji.
in practice, we are advising 20 rupees stamp paper, 11 months, which is not correct, legally not correct.
Okay, okay, thank you. Good one.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Chalo.
Sir, Mr. Ashok Menon is waiting.
Yes.
Ashok Menon.
Excellent talk, Balaji.
Thank you so much, sir.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
I've seen you grow right from day one, and it's a brilliant talk.
Thank you.
Now, where I agree with you is this
Yes.
is a very progressive legislation
Yes.
for the landlord. Excellent, but the act very badly drafted, Balaji.
And they have picked and chose provisions from Delhi Rent Control Act,
Yes.
Tenancy Act.
I will, instead of taking much time, I will just touch upon 2 things quickly.
Yes.
Just see the irony of the thing, irony of the act. Now, you take 21.
Yes.
A tenant shall not be evicted during the continuance of tenancy agreement except in accordance with the provisions of subsection 2.
Yes.
Okay. As you already touched on, 2G. You say the agreement is for 3 years. Can you now within the 3 years ask for eviction for residential or non-residential? What is the point of registration then?
You cannot. You are bound by the terms of the agreement. But 20 opening words.
Does it not go contrary?
Contrary. Yes. I agree.
Straight away contrary?
Yes.
Okay. Number 1. Number 2, Balaji, just take 15.5 for a minute.
15.5. 15.5. Yes. In case the premise is uninhabitable.
You are opening the floodgates. Just see, you're opening the floodgates. The section says in case the premises is uninhabitable without repairs and the landlord has refused to carry out the required repairs, after being called upon to get the repairs done in writing by the tenant shall have the right to abandon the premises after giving 15 days notice. Now I am the tenant, you are the landlord. I say repairs are required, I write to you. Actually, repairs are not required. I owe you 2 years rent. I suddenly abandon and I run away. Where are you?
In the streets.
What is this? Very, very difficult situation the Act has.
Yeah, there are definitely grey areas. 100% I agree.
Lot of grey areas. Lot of grey areas. Then one more thing. Take section 33. Appeals. Their appeal, as you rightly put it, is available. Now, take 20 to 1. Take 20 to 1. 20 to 1.
Section.
Yes.
20 to 1.
Yeah. Where an order for recovery of possession of any premises made on the ground specified in clause 3 of section 2 of 21, the landlord will obtain possession thereof within a period of 1 month in the residential, 3 months non-residential. Okay, no quarrel. Provided in the case of premises let by category of landlords specified in third schedule or by their spouse or dependents, children including dependents of pre-deceased personnel in armed forces, landlords should be entitled to obtain immediately.
Immediately. No time should be given.
What about your appeal provision then?
This is subject to appeal.
No, immediate. What is immediate?
Rent controller should
What
not
meaning
grant
of
time.
immediate?
Rent court should not grant time. As they normally do, give 1 month, 3 months time.
Yeah, without
because
time,
he is
are
a
you
senior
not?
citizen, because the landlady is a widow, they are treated
Whatever
on
it
a
is.
separate footing. So that is the only
Whatever it
object.
is. I mean,
It does
this
not,
is not
take
against
away,
principles of natural justice.
it does not take away the right of the tenant to file an appeal.
You don't give time. Can you evict a person without which law contemplates?
The tenant has to be diligent, file an appeal immediately.
That's right. That is possible. Certified copy. Various aspects are there. That is another grey area. Then, as you said, there are several grey areas in this act, which we will have to see how the High Court works it out.
Yes.
It is a good act, progressive.
Definitely. But actual workability, there will be glitches.
Solved in the sense, no 47, no Order 21, Rule 97, 98, all that I agree. But unfortunately, in my opinion, drafted in a hell of a hurry, lot of sections will have to be
revisited. Yes, revisited.
And there should be a difference between default and willful. Like you rightly touched upon the pandemic. Earlier, you know the law very well. The default and willful default, there was a very serious difference, isn't it?
Yes.
That ought to be there. You can't just club everything.
Everything on one heading.
Yes, and with great respect, the Delhi High Court was wrong. With great respect, you mean to say every non-residential building? Look at you know, Balaji, you are dealing with this subject.
True.
Yes, and you are.
Tenants who are not able to enter the premises.
Yes.
You can't expect
where are you going to run a restaurant, a lodge? How can you be expected to pay the rent?
Generate income to pay their laborers. It's going to be a very difficult situation.
Yes. So my opinion is this act has to be gone into slowly. Good act. It should be for the landlord. As you said, 26, 27, progressive, property manager, NRIs, all that is correct. But this act has got to be gone into slowly. Every section will go to the High Court, take it from me.
Definitely.
Every section will require pronouncement from the High Court.
Shahs are very happy now.
I think every advocate will be happy. Anyway, thank you.
Right.
And my regards to father.
Sure.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Menon.
Bye.
Yeah. Mr. Ganesan.
It was a wonderful presentation. I have a
Thank
small
you.
doubt.
Thank
you so much. I have a small doubt. Section 23, you say the 3 grounds are there, and if the payment is not made, then they are supposed to pay the compensation, double the amount.
Correct.
Okay. In case if the tenant is not paying, should I once again venture into the civil court and take the relief from there, or is there any specific in the act itself?
You can invoke 23 before the rent court and say there is a default. You give me double the rent.
And if he's not paying?
He's not paying, you can execute under section 39. Attachment of property, attachment of bank account, everything is now available. Unlike earlier act, you can attach bank accounts of the tenant. You can attach other properties of the tenant to recover monies.
But the earlier occasion, we have to go before the civil court, file a civil
now it is not necessary.
Now it is not necessary.
No, not necessary. Again, question of payment of court fee is debatable. Whether when you invoke this clause, whether you will have to pay court fee, valuing it at double the rent, or the original rent is going to be a bone of contention.
And again, is it under section 43? 3% has to be paid.
That is very 43 says talks about proceedings disputes for eviction between landlord and tenant. This is the court fee payable. These are cases where the arrears of rent you cannot file it as a suit here. You can claim arrears of rent as an interim relief, as I told you. It's again open for debate.
Okay.
Can you do it? It's open for debate. You can ask for the entire arrears of rent. Avoid filing a suit. Seek it as an interim relief, or allow your petition to be numbered. Invoke section 25 and say give me double the 23 to 25 and say pay me the arrears.
Okay. If I'm allowed to say one thing, I will say. See, an act must be doing justice to both the parties.
Definitely.
Balance.
Balance.
Yeah, balance. The
balance is tilted in favor of landlord.
Tilted in favor of the landlord. Earlier it was in favor of the tenant.
Definitely it is tilted. There is scope for misuse. There is scope for misuse. Which courts have
previous law was in favor of tenant.
Exactly.
Current law in favor of the landlord. This is the balance the government has done.
Good one, very good one.
Thank you so much, Balaji sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ganesan. Mr. Venkatesh and Vasanta Kumar.
Sir, எனக்கு ஒரு டவுட் என்னன்னா சார், tenant who has took the premises for running a lodging house is refusing to pay the rent, saying that due to lockdown period, no inmates are coming to the lodge. Therefore, I couldn't generate income.
Correct.
Therefore, please waive the rent. He is asking, what is the request to the landlord?
The landlord, sir, you can follow Delhi High Court division bench single judge and say, no, you can act like a Shylock and say, I am not bothered about what you lose, you pay me my rent. That is one school of thought.
Yes, sir.
Landlords can be reasonable, understand the situation and say, okay, I will defer payment. I will waive 2 months rent or 3 months rent, you pay me, or you pay this arrears next year when business picks up.
Yes, sir.
Compromise formula will be win-win is my opinion, instead of taking advantage of the situation.
But I offered 30% of the discount of rent and even waived 10% of the future rent to be increased, but he is not acceding.
Oh, then he doesn't deserve the equity. You can proceed to evict him.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Yes,
thank you, sir. Mr. Balaji.
Yes, sir.
Your friend Sandeep has one more question. Mr. Sandeep.
Samir.
Sorry, Samir. I'm sorry, sir.
No problem. It is one and the same. We both brothers are together. One and
okay, sir. You please ask.
As Mr. Menon sir had put it, that section for repairs.
15.
There, if the landlord wants to harass the tenant, the landlord will definitely not carry out the repairs.
No, there is a provision where tenant can carry out.
But then what
only when it is uninhabitable, no building breaks down totally, can't be occupied. Repairs contemplated, tenant can carry out repairs, adjust. Only where extreme situation, it is not habitable. Appada this problem will arise. Not in other cases. Other cases, tenant can repair, seek to adjust from the landlord, from the rents payable. That is provided.
Unseasonal rains and all make the way easy for the landlord. No? If it is a little old building, though Mr. Menon put it very nicely and he favored the landlord, but I will favor the tenants.
Then, there are two sides of a coin. One side landlord, one side tenant.
Yeah, but as
Balaji, this is how this act is being balanced here.
No. I would like to make one more request. Srinivasan sir said that the old act was in favor of tenant. We will say old act was also in favor of landlord.
No.
Favorable to landlord.
Definitely it is loaded in favor of tenants.
Yeah. Comparatively.
Definitely loaded in favor of
one more doubt. Sorry. Yes. Suppose now in the bargaining, in the renewal of the tenancy, say for example, old tenancy continues before the act. Now new tenancy, we have to new agreement we have to finalize. Deliberately, if landlord don't agree with the terms.
That is what I told you. That is unreasonable. Definitely unreasonable, especially 4(2), where there is no agreement prior to commencement of the act. There is a high chance of landlords misusing the provision.
Then draft a writ affidavit will challenge it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Balaji, one Mr. Anvit Kumar wants to ask a question.
Yes.
Mr. Anvit Kumar.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Anvit.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yes.
Is registration under this act mandatory for government authorities, sir?
For?
Government buildings.
Yeah, with the rent authority, there is no exception. Everybody has to register.
Sir, my question is that because when we give rent to the government authorities, they actually delay the rent payment, no, sir?
Yes.
For allotment. Then how is this registration possible, sir? The rent should be paid in a time period, no, sir, according to the agreement.
So that you enforce the terms of your agreement. If your agreement is pakka and it contemplates prompt payment of rent within the 10th day of the next month, you can enforce.
Okay.
As long as you see, you need not depend on the government officer or the authority to come and help you register. As long as the agreement is in writing, as the landlord, you can approach the rent authority and get it registered.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Anvit Kumar. I think Ms. Alamelu Venkat wants a question to be asked.
நல்லா இருந்தது லெக்சர். எனக்கு வந்து ஒரு 2011 லீஸ் டீட வச்சு I filed a case in 2015, sir.
சரி. எங்க RCO?
I was a tenant.
Okay.
Suit தான் போட்டேன் for recovery of money ke because he has not returned a certain amount of deposit of amount.
Okay, after you vacated.
After I vacated.
Okay.
So the suit is pending, but the lease deed is not registered at all. Based on that, one suit was dismissed in city civil court. The lease deed was not registered. Okay. What is the outcome of the non-registered lease deed, sir?
So, 49 Registration Act will come to your rescue. Collateral, if you are able to prove, or there is an admission in previous proceedings that this amount was paid by you as advance. Your agreement is if you are able to otherwise establish or by collateral document or transaction, if you prove that this advance was paid, you can still get a decree. You need not worry because your agreement is unregistered.
Okay, sir. And any books released by you on this new tenancy act?
No, I'm working on one. Working on one.
Wait பண்ணுங்க, நீங்க புது book நீங்க முதல் கையால வாங்கலாம், வெயிட் பண்ணுங்க.
Okay.
He is writing a book on the subject and it is going to be the first commentary ever on this subject.
Okay, sir. Wait
for a grand function, right?
Srinivasa Raghavan sir, ரொம்ப thank பண்ணனும் எங்களுக்கு.
கண்டிப்பா, very commendable.
Lectures useful, very useful lecture, sir.
Anyhow, thanks for your comments. And people like Balaji make this webinar successful.
Yes,
I'm blessed with a very good resource person, and at a call they agree. That's the biggest advantage I have. So thank you for your compliment, and participants like you make it richer and worth. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Balaji. I think we come to the end of this session. At times, the resource person deliberation may be interesting, but not the interaction. At times, interaction alone may be interesting, but not the discourse. This time, I'm very frank with you. Both the deliberation and interactions were very much interesting, and the interaction was lively, and the questions were some unexpected angle. And I'm very happy to see that you were able to answer all the questions without any letter down. And I salute your knowledge on this subject. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy for the session of the day. And we'll keep you disturbing in the future.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of the series, Hemalata, my co-host and participants, once again, a big thank you, Mr. Balaji. Thank you.
Good day. Stay safe, all of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah.